So it's a real delight to have Sarah in conversation today. And so we're going to be talking about coaching purpose. And this really follows the release of Sarah's latest book, Powered by Purpose. And I was really keen to obviously connect with you, Sarah, around this topic, because I know from my own coaching practice, but also from coaches that are training with us, this is a conversation that's emerged a great deal over this period, during lockdown, etc., as well as previously, these existential questions that sometimes coaches are bringing. So it's a delight you can be here, really, and be in conversation with me. And some of the group may recognize you from the CPD day back in July, when you ran a session for us on dialogue within groups, which I know is one of your areas of expertise, but as well being a sort of pioneer around purpose-led leadership as well. In addition to, I suppose, your work as a consultant and a coach, and you've also founded Bridgework, the consultancy. So so bringing a wealth of experience, really. And I'm conscious that Sarah's...
I'm delighted to be here.
Great, Sarah. So where should we start? So maybe before we get into the book, maybe just say a bit more to the group about your work currently.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for acknowledging about the dialogue work that I do. And really the purpose-led leadership work has grown out of many years working with leadership teams, working with leaders, facilitating conversations, helping them to have the conversations that matter most. And really, I noticed a number of years ago, working with leadership teams, that when the existential question, as you rightly said, came into the room, why are we here? What would our stakeholders miss about us if we cease to exist? The dialogue dropped to a deeper level. And once the team got clear about its purpose and there was a shared understanding, then I saw performance and well-being really increase. So my current work, the heart of it is really coaching individuals and teams around purpose. And that could be purpose at an individual level, a team level, or a whole organizational level. That's the heart of my work. Thanks,
Sarah. So let's start to move into a conversation around, I suppose, some of your reflections from the book. And I wanted to start because obviously I know that it's taken a while for you to get the book completed and published. And we were talking about this a number of years ago, but so 4 to 5 years to get this book out. And I suppose I'm interested about what's made you persevere to get the book published.
Oh, well, maybe I jinxed myself by wanting to write a book called Powered by Purpose, although actually the title came quite late in the day, in that it was a real test of my own commitment to what my own purpose is. And if I had to summarize that, I would say it's all about energizing people to do great work that makes a difference, work that really serves stakeholders and wider society. I think, I'd written a book previously called How to Have Meaningful Conversations. That book had been commissioned about 8 years ago. Looking back, I was very fortunate. This book required jumping through all the usual hurdles that authors have to go through, finding a publisher, making a submission, and all that did take a while. It took about 4 or 5 years. And I think what kept me going was wanting to give a sense of hope that leadership is changing, and there are some great role models out there who are leading in a different way. And I wanted to write a book about feeling inspired and give practical how-tos. And also I admit a sense of frustration with the question about where have all the great leaders gone, and wanting to challenge that mainstream model of the great you know, there's a great man who's born a leader or a great woman who's born a leader, and wanting to take a much more systemic approach to leadership as well. So I wanted to write a book that I would have loved to have read that I wasn't finding on any bookshelf anywhere.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And you know, in the book, I know that you explore some key capacities that really enable leaders to, I suppose, lead from a place of purpose. And I thought it'd be interesting for the people dialing in to perhaps hear or perhaps about one or two of these capacities, and then maybe we can explore one of them in a bit more detail.
Sure. So I could give a very quick overview of the 4 capacities at the heart of the book. So I write about cultivating leadership presence and being wholehearted in our leadership and our desire that include looking at the existential questions, and they can be tough conversations as well. So upskilling to have those, to have richer dialogue. 3rd capacity is all about engaging your stakeholders and recognizing that there's a broad array of stakeholders if we take a purpose-led approach. So way beyond just serving shareholders, for example, but employees, suppliers, it might be the local community as a stakeholder, nature as a stakeholder. So a really broad approach to this notion of stakeholder. And the final capacity, I called it connect on purpose. And as I said before, all about how we become purpose-led in our individual leadership, in our team leadership, and if we're leading a whole organization, casting an inspiring North Star for the organization as a whole.
Thank you. So, and I think just because your Wi-Fi froze a bit, the 2nd capacity was the one that we didn't hear. So you okay just reinforcing the 2nd one?
Sure. Apologies for the intermittent Wi-Fi. Yes, make dialogue authentic. So how do you have the conversation that is more existential, that looks at the meaningful and enduring reason that an organization or a team exists? And having worked, for example, with bankers and been in the room where bankers are having a dialogue about their reason to exist, it can be quite challenging with a whole different diverse range of perspectives. So how do you have a dialogue where each person feels they can contribute and you can get a shared understanding coming out of that, of the collective intelligence that there is there in the room? It's an art.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I suppose in some ways that takes me back to the first capacity around leadership presence, because for me and the work that we do at Catalyst, about really at the heart of our work as coaches is about our presence, but also enabling our clients to move into presence in the session. So can you say a bit more about the capacity around leadership presence?
Yes, and I'm really aware this is an area of real common interest that we have. And I very deliberately made it the first of the 4 capacities, because as you will know, and I'm sure many of the people listening know, you know, so much in terms of the quality of dialogue and how we connect with other people flows out of the degree to which we are fully landed here in the moment with a clear mind and an open heart. And that we're also in touch with our felt sense in our bodies, for example, about what right action is. And all of that is so fundamental to leadership. And I think purpose and becoming purpose-led requires real courage, because sometimes we have to stop doing things we have to end a relationship or a project. And so being in touch with that deeper presence really helps us to be bold when we need to be bold and compassionate when we need to be compassionate.
Yeah, and as you say that, you know, there's the sort of sense of perhaps what's being required from leaders in the current phase of whether we're returning to work or not, or, you know, in terms of some of the challenges we're facing in this country, or you know, wider in terms of society. And I just I suppose it just talks so much to how leaders come from a place, because you hear a lot about authenticity, don't you? And I know there's an interest there for you in terms of how your work is evolving. So that sort of place of leadership presence, I'm interested about how this connects to authenticity, because I know for some leaders, you know, being authentic is something that perhaps they feel they can't do because of what perhaps the role or something is requiring of them. But can you just say a bit more about authenticity?
Yes, and I think there's a real interplay, connection between being purpose-led and being authentic, because we can only tune into our purpose if we're in touch with ourselves and in touch with our true selves. Because of course, if we talk about being authentic, the question comes up, authentic to what? What are we being authentic to? And I think it really helps to have a sense through just being present to ourselves of what engages us and energizes us. And then purpose becomes clearer. It comes more clearly into view. So by becoming more real and more authentic, it creates space in which we can see our purpose more clearly.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So I'm just, again, it's a bit of a, I suppose, a curveball question, but, you know, we're hearing a lot at the moment around, I suppose, organizations flourishing and thriving, you know, in the face of the pandemic, etc. And so the question I wanted to lead into next was, you know, in order for individuals, teams, organizations to thrive, you know, is purpose on its own enough? I just wondered what your thoughts were about that.
I would say purpose is necessary but not sufficient on its own to create flourishing organizations, teams and individuals. And in fact, I've certainly seen it be the case that sometimes focusing on purpose might actually be I'm going to call it a spiritual bypass. That means we don't look at other things like why staff morale is poor. So I think there can be a temptation to think that purpose could be a bit of a silver bullet. It's quite trendy at the moment to be focused on purpose. But it might be that there are other things that need to be attended to, cultural issues, if people aren't feeling there's a fair exchange, for example, in terms of the effort they're giving and the reward they're getting, then those things need to be looked at. So there are many, many things that contribute to thriving organizations, and purpose is one of them, and it's a key one, but it is by no means the magic wand that solves all problems.
Thank you, Sarah. And as the group are listening, you know, please feel free to pop any reflections or questions that may be arising for you. So I've just seen one that's come through from Kizzy, Sarah. So if it's okay, I'm just going to bring that in as a way of building on there, where Kizzy's asked, what are the flags to whether to look at purpose or another key issue? So I think that's just reflecting on what she just heard you share.
Yeah, well, purpose really answers the question around what's the enduring and meaningful reason that we exist. So if there's a lack of engagement, if there's a lack of meaningful work, then I think that would point you in the direction of looking at purpose and having a dialogue about that. If there are reports of, as in some of the organisations I've worked with, of managers being bullies, for example, then that's a different kind of conversation about why those behaviours are happening, or back to the example of people not feeling fairly remunerated. Again, that might not take us down the path of looking at purpose, but it's a different kind of conversation. Having said that, I do think that purpose is, it involves chunking up a level, and once that's clear, decision making, for example, can become clearer in a team or an organization. It becomes clearer what you don't do as well as what you do. So quick example, you might know that BP, the energy company, over in recent times has redefined its purpose as reimagining energy for people and the planet. And on the back of that, and the CEO there, Bernard Looney, his announcement of the purpose, BP stopped doing certain things. So they withdrew from certain trade associations to really back up their purpose with action. And so I don't know if it's quite a direct answer to Kizzy's question there, but a green flag for me around purpose would be that there are clear, tangible actions being taken in alignment with the purpose, that would reduce the likelihood of it being about purpose wash, or it not really being a truly authentic purpose.
Thank you, Sarah. And you know, you mentioned an example there of the CEO and BP as an organization. Just in terms of bringing this to life, when you think about purpose-led leaders, just anyone else that comes to mind for you?
Oh, I write about a number of leaders in the book. So Rose Marcario, as the CEO of Patagonia, I write about her bold leadership. So Patagonia, often held out as being a purpose-led company, so not just about producing great outdoor clothing, but also wanting to inspire solutions to the environmental crisis. And under when Donald Trump was president of the United States, and they changed the legislation so that organizations didn't have to pay such high amounts of tax for environmental reasons, Patagonia donated what they'd saved in order to pay their tax bill to environmental campaigning organizations. Because they, you know, that's their cause, that's what they really believe in, and that's also what their customers love them for. And so it's this, you know, purpose is not just about having fine words written on a page. It really is about taking right action, if I can put it like that, right action that really serves people and the planet.
Thank you. And you know, I'm just assuming that most of the people here are going to be coaches. I know a lot of them are. So in terms of just your advice, really, you know, if you're sitting in front of a leader that's reflecting around their sense of purpose individually, or maybe it's the purpose of their team, or perhaps even wider in terms of systemically, in terms of the organization, what's some advice you would give a coach around perhaps, yeah, how to work with this in the session, in the coaching process, Sarah?
Oh, thank you. Great question. I mean, one word of counsel would be just make time and space for it, because sometimes it's less the case that we have to go out looking for our purpose, that sometimes our purpose comes and finds us. and being in a receptive space, noticing, encouraging your coachee to notice what really engages and energizes you, really. Who are the people that you really love to help, to serve? Who are your beneficiaries, really? And those questions can take time to have a full answer to. I think it's also the case, and I've seen this with some of my own coachees, that their purpose is right underneath their noses and they just haven't quite seen it. It just hasn't quite come fully into view. It could also be the case that a leader or a manager is living their purpose, or there's the potential for them to, but because they're in a toxic environment, or because they have a difficult relationship with their boss or with the other board members, they feel quite stuck and quite blocked. So they might think that they're really off track with themselves. But if you actually dig down to the essence of why are you in that role, what do you love doing, what's meaningful for you, it is actually all potentially there, but the culture is getting in the way. And so these things require a bit of time and space to unpack, but taking the time and space is really, really valuable.
Yeah, thank you. And I suppose just to push that a little bit further, because one of the journeys that we go on as coaches as well is often connecting to, that sense of purpose that we're holding within the work that we're, the way that we're being actually with our clients is more than what we're doing. And again, just for coaches that are struggling with this in terms of, what's my purpose in this work, again, what would you recommend to them to do in terms of in that creation of that space as a way of connecting to more of a form around purpose,
Well, one thing that comes to mind is just remembering that distinction between being and doing, and just, I think purpose is so much about how we are being, and not to lose sight of that, not to get too trapped into thinking it's all about what we're doing out there, but actually noticing your own energy levels, noticing your own felt sense. Do I feel on track? Do I feel in my right place? So there's that beingness dimension to purpose that I think when we're in a coaching role, it really helps to bring that in. Because as I say, it's, if we chase too hard after purpose, I think it can seem even more elusive, actually, because it's about something, often the purpose path comes and finds us. And sometimes, and I'm thinking of the work of Bill George here, based at Harvard, and his book around finding your North Star and so on, he writes very well about how purpose is sometimes born out of what he calls our crucible moments, those times in our life where we've really felt tested. And it's like the dross of the personality sometimes gets burnt away. That's why he calls it crucible moments. And we really feel in touch with the essence of who we are. And so in that way, although purpose can be very energizing, it can also be related to what's been painful for us in our lives, what we really deeply care about, or times when we felt judged or discriminated against, and then actually that creates in us a real desire and fire in our bellies to go out there and take a stand for people, or really nail our colours to the mast of a certain cause. So it's useful to reflect on crucible moments, crucible experiences too.
Thank you. And there's so much more that I could take this conversation, but I want to go back because Chantal did post the question earlier, so I just want to pick up on in terms of this is on an individual basis, helping clients understand what's meant by authenticity. So she said that it means different things to different people. So yeah, just when you're explaining around authenticity, Sarah, the leaders you're supporting, how are you holding that conversation with them so they understand what authenticity actually means in their context,
Yeah, well, there is a whole body of work around authentic leadership that I've drawn on in my own thinking and work. And there's a number of components to it that is well established in the literature. So very briefly, and can you still hear me, Damion?
Yeah, I can, yes.
I think I might have frozen there.
Yeah, I can hear you. You're visually frozen, but I can hear you okay.
Oh, you can hear me okay.
You're
so
back.
Just great. So just very briefly, a few of the dimensions. So deep self-awareness, awareness of our strengths, awareness of our development areas, the capacity to authentically relate to other people. So again, back to dialogue in a way. So being willing to take a risk, to say what's really true for you, to be open and transparent in dialogue. The part of being authentic is about really being able to attune to other people and share what's appropriate for that moment and that particular interaction. And I think the final dimension that resonates for me from the literature is around being able to navigate ethical dilemmas and make, back to taking right action, making the right decision, including in times of uncertainty where we don't know all the data. So that's the body of work around authenticity. And I think purpose is part of that as well. It's written about in some of the literature, but I think there could be more inclusion of passion and purpose in being authentic.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. And I can see Chantal's put a message to say thank you for that as well. So there are some other questions that come through. We're really sort of pressed against time. Just anything else you just like to share with the group, Sarah, about purpose from your work? And again, I appreciate it's a broad question just before I start to bring the session to a close.
Yeah, that really including it in your coaching really does take the conversation to another level. And as a coach and as a change agent, think about your own purpose as well. As there's that principle in therapy, isn't there, that we can only take people as far as we've gone ourselves. So I think it's really worth investing time and energy to reflect on our own purpose. I challenged myself to see if I could come up with my purpose in 6 or 7 words. And that's one of the ways I got to, energize people to do great work. How would you explain it to an intelligent 8-year-old? That's another good way to challenge yourself about getting clarity on your own purpose so you can then help your coachees even more.
Wonderful as always, Sarah. Really appreciate you taking this time. And just to say to the group that Sarah's going to be running a session for us on purpose on a CPD event next year. So just to sort of flag that up. But as always, Sarah, really appreciate your time. Just say to the group, just before I sort of get Sarah to say any final remarks, it's just our next webinar is going to be on the 18th of October at 1 o'clock, and that's going to be around transactional analysis drivers in coaching, and that'll be with our faculty member Sandra Goddard. So I hope you can dial into that one. But any closing remarks from you, Sarah, just before I bring this session to a close?
Oh, I'm going to quote a coachee of mine who said to me a little while back, purpose is my anchor. You know, we often think of it as our North Star, but she was saying, you know, in this sea of changeability and these really disrupted times, it's my anchor. And so I learn a lot from my coachees. So I'll just end with those wise words from a coachee: purpose is my anchor.
And it leads so nicely to that place of right action, like you're saying as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Damion. Thanks for all the people who came to listen to.
Yeah, we'll see you soon, and yeah, keep well and go well in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you.